The courtroom went dead silent when the 320-pound con artist turned to Judge Judy with a condescending smirk and said the words that would destroy his entire scheme. "Your Honor, this elderly woman is just confused. At her age, memory gets fuzzy." But what Derek Thompson didn't know was that Judge Judy had a secret witness waiting in the wings who would expose every single one of his lies in the most devastating courtroom takedown ever captured on television. What happened next became the most watched courtroom moment of 2024, shared over 85 million times across every social media platform imaginable, with the hashtag Gaslighter exposed trending for 5 consecutive days. This wasn't just a case about a home renovation gone wrong. It was about a predator who used his physical size, booming voice, and psychological manipulation to terrorize vulnerable elderly women, convincing them they were crazy while he robbed them blind. Before we show you the exact moment this manipulator's world came crashing down, make sure you smash that like button if you believe liars and con artists deserve to be exposed on national television. Hit subscribe because what you're about to witness will restore your faith in justice and prove that even the most skilled gaslighters eventually meet someone who sees right through their act. Trust me, the secret witness revealed at the end will leave you absolutely speechless and cheering for karma. Linda Martinez sat in the plaintiff's chair, her 72-year-old hands trembling as she clutched a folder containing receipts, photographs, and the shattered dreams of her late husband's final wish. She was a retired elementary school teacher who had spent 40 years shaping young minds, teaching children about honesty, integrity, and doing the right thing. Now she was living on a fixed income of just $1,800 per month in Social Security benefits, trying to make ends meet in the modest home she and her husband, Robert, had purchased 30 years ago. Robert had passed away 14 months earlier from heart disease, and his final wish had been for Linda to convert his workshop into a beautiful craft room, where she could pursue her lifelong passion for quilting and maybe teach neighborhood children the skills her own grandmother had taught her decades ago. That's when Derek Thompson entered her life like a hurricane wrapped in a cheap polyester suit. Linda had been scrolling through Facebook one evening, looking at craft room inspiration photos when an advertisement appeared specifically targeting her zip code. Professional contractor, 15 years experience, specializing in senior-friendly renovations, licensed and insured. Satisfaction guaranteed. The photos showed beautiful room transformations, happy elderly clients standing in their newly renovated spaces, and 5-star reviews praising Derek's professionalism and attention to detail. What Linda didn't know was that every single photo was stolen from other contractors' websites. Every review was fabricated, and the license number listed didn't exist in any state database. Derek had called her within an hour of her inquiry, his voice smooth and reassuring, calling her sweetheart and honey like they were old friends. He talked about his own grandmother, how he specialized in helping seniors because they reminded him of family, how he understood that people on fixed incomes needed honest pricing and quality work. He showed up at her house driving a truck with magnetic signs that could be removed in seconds, wearing a polo shirt with a fake company logo, carrying a clipboard that made him look official and trustworthy. He spent 2 hours measuring, nodding sympathetically at Linda's stories about Robert, and promising that he would honor her late husband's memory by creating the most beautiful craft room she could imagine. The quote was $8,500 for a complete renovation, removing the old workbenches, installing new drywall, professional electrical work for proper lighting, and custom built-in shelving for her fabric and supplies. Derek had pushed hard for a $6,000 cash deposit, explaining that paying cash would help him avoid contractor fees and pass those savings directly to her. He had rushed her through signing the contract, using technical jargon about load-bearing walls and electrical codes that confused her, making her feel like she was too old and too stupid to understand construction details. Linda had withdrawn nearly all of her emergency savings, money she had been carefully setting aside for medical expenses and property taxes, and handed it over to a man she had known for less than 3 hours. What Linda got for her, $6,000, was a nightmare that would haunt her for months. Derek had shown up sporadically over the next 3 weeks, always arriving hours late, always leaving early, and always on his phone arguing with other clients or his girlfriend. He had torn down walls without proper support, cut electrical wires incorrectly, creating a serious fire hazard, and damaged a gas line that started leaking carbon monoxide into her home. The workshop that had held 30 years of Robert's tools and memories, was now a dangerous construction zone filled with exposed wiring, holes in the walls, and structural damage that made the entire back section of her house unsafe to occupy. When Derek demanded another $2,500 for what he called unexpected complications discovered during the demolition work, Linda finally realized something was terribly wrong. She hired a real contractor to do a safety inspection, and what he found made her blood run cold. The gas line Derek had damaged was leaking dangerous levels of carbon monoxide that could have killed her in her sleep. The electrical work violated every code in the book, with live wires exposed and connections that could spark a fire at any moment. The walls Derek had removed were actually load-bearing, meaning the structural integrity of her entire home was now compromised. The real contractor estimated it would cost $14,000 just to repair the damage Derek had caused, not including the renovation work Linda had originally wanted. She had paid $6,000 for the privilege of having her home turned into a death trap. That's when Derek's true nature revealed itself like a monster removing its disguise. When Linda called demanding her money back and compensation for the damage, Derek's friendly contractor persona evaporated completely and was replaced by something far more sinister. His voice became cold and menacing. "You're misremembering our agreement, Linda. At your age, memory gets fuzzy. We talked about all this work. You approved every decision. Those problems were already there in your husband's shoddy workshop. You're just trying to scam me out of my hard-earned money." The gaslighting had begun in earnest, and Derek was a master of the craft. He had done this so many times before that he knew exactly which psychological buttons to push to make his elderly victims question their own sanity. Derek started showing up at Linda's house unannounced, his massive frame filling her doorway, using his physical size to intimidate and threaten without ever making an explicit threat. He would stand there blocking her exit, his voice getting louder and more aggressive, telling her that she was confused, that she was getting old, that maybe she needed to see a doctor about her memory problems. He sent text messages at 2 a.m, telling her that his lawyer was preparing a lawsuit against her for defamation and breach of contract. He created fake text message chains using burner phones, making it appear as though Linda had approved all the destructive work and had agreed to the additional charges. The psychological warfare was relentless and calculated, designed to break down an elderly widow who was already grieving her husband and questioning her ability to manage alone. Linda spent sleepless nights crying, staring at the destroyed workshop that represented her final connection to Robert, wondering if Derek was right. Maybe she was too old. Maybe her memory was failing. Maybe she had approved work she couldn't remember approving. She stopped eating properly, lost 15 pounds in a month, and started having panic attacks whenever her phone rang. Her daughter, who lived 3 states away, noticed her mother's deteriorating mental state during their weekly video calls and begged her to fight back, to report Derek to the police and to take him to court. But Linda was paralyzed by self-doubt and fear. Derek had convinced her that she was the problem, that she was a confused old woman trying to get something for nothing, and that any attempt to fight him would only make things worse. What Linda didn't know was that she was just one victim in a carefully orchestrated pattern of elder fraud that stretched across 3 states and had destroyed the lives of at least 13 other elderly homeowners. Derek Thompson was a professional predator who had spent years perfecting his system. He specifically targeted widows and widowers in the first 2 years after losing their spouse, knowing they were vulnerable, isolated, and desperate for human connection. He found them through targeted Facebook advertisements, online obituaries, and senior center bulletin boards. He studied their financial situations carefully, determining exactly how much money they could access before family members or banks would intervene. He knew that elderly victims were less likely to report fraud because they were embarrassed, confused, or afraid that reporting him would make them look incompetent to their children. Derek kept detailed files on every victim, noting their vulnerabilities, their family situations, their cognitive status, and their likelihood of fighting back. He had faced complaints before, but his strategy was always the same: gaslight the victim into silence, produce fake evidence showing the work was approved, and use his size and aggressive personality to intimidate anyone who challenged him. 3 previous complaints to the state contractor board had been dismissed or settled quietly because Derek's victims were too frightened or too mentally exhausted to pursue formal charges. He had learned that the legal system often dismissed elderly complainants as confused or unreliable, and he used that prejudice as a weapon. But Derek Thompson had made one critical mistake in his years of predatory behavior. He had underestimated Linda Martinez's daughter, who refused to let her mother become another silent victim. She compiled every text message, every receipt, and every photograph of the damage. She contacted other victims through online complaint boards and discovered the pattern, and she had sent all of this evidence directly to the Judge Judy show, along with a detailed letter explaining how this predator was systematically destroying elderly lives. Derek Thompson strutted into Judge Judy's courtroom like a man who had never faced real consequences for his actions in his entire life. At 320 pounds, he took up physical space with deliberate intimidation, his too tight polyester suit straining across his shoulders, sweat already forming on his forehead under the courtroom lights. His fake Rolex caught the camera angles as he gestured dramatically, and his voice boomed across the room with the kind of aggressive confidence that had terrorized vulnerable elderly women for years. He shot a dismissive glance at Linda Martinez, who sat small and trembling in the plaintiff's chair, then turned to Judge Judy with a smirk that suggested he believed this would be just another easy victory in his long career of manipulation and fraud. Judge Judy sat behind her bench with the calm patience of an apex predator, watching prey walk directly into a carefully constructed trap. In her 25 years presiding over family court in New York and another 2 decades on television, she had developed an almost supernatural ability to spot liars, con artists, and bullies within the first 30 seconds of meeting them. Derek Thompson had triggered every single one of her alarm bells the moment she reviewed his paperwork the night before. She had counted 23 different lies and inconsistencies in his initial filing, before he even walked through her courtroom doors. Now she was going to systematically dismantle him in front of millions of viewers, and she was going to enjoy every second of it. The case began with Derek's opening statement, and it was a masterclass in manipulation and victim blaming. "Your Honor," he began, his voice dripping with fake sincerity, "I'm actually the victim here. Mrs. Martinez is a confused elderly woman who doesn't understand how construction works. I did exactly what she asked me to do, but now she's experiencing memory problems and trying to blame me for pre-existing issues in her home. At her age, people get confused about timelines and conversations. It's sad, really, but I can't let her take advantage of me just because she's elderly. I'm here to collect the $2,500 she still owes me for work I completed in good faith." Linda's hands gripped the arms of her chair as Derek's words washed over her like poison. This was the same gaslighting technique he had used for months. And even here in court, surrounded by cameras and an audience, he was trying to convince everyone that she was the problem. Judge Judy watched Linda's physical response, the way her shoulders hunched, the way she started to shrink into herself and her expression hardened. She had seen this dynamic countless times before, a bully using psychological manipulation to make their victim doubt their own reality. Judge Judy's first questions were deceptively simple, almost casual. "Mr. Thompson, where is your contractor's license?" Derek's response came too quickly, too smoothly, practiced from years of deflection. "I have my license, Your Honor. It's registered in multiple states. I've been doing this work for 15 years. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly. "Show me the license number." Derek fumbled with his phone, scrolling through screens, his confidence faltering just a fraction. "I don't have it pulled up right now, but I can get it to you." Judge Judy's eyebrows raised. That signature expression regular viewers knew meant someone was about to be destroyed. "You came to court to sue for $2,500, but you didn't bring your contractor's license information?" Derek's face reddened. "I didn't think I'd need it for a simple contract dispute." The trap was being set piece by piece, and Derek was walking right into it. Judge Judy continued her questioning, each inquiry seemingly innocent but actually building a prosecutorial case. "Did you pull permits for this work?" Derek shifted in his chair, his bulk making the movement awkward. "Mrs. Martinez said she didn't want to deal with permits." "That's not true." Linda's voice came out small but firm. "He told me permits weren't necessary for interior work." Judge Judy held up a hand. "Mrs. Martinez, I'll get to you in a moment. Mr. Thompson, removing load-bearing walls requires permits in every jurisdiction in this country. Are you telling me you didn't know that?" Derek's strategy shifted to aggression, his go-to tactic when cornered. Your Honor, with all due respect, you're not a contractor. The construction industry has its own way of doing things. Sometimes we have to make judgment calls in the field. The courtroom went silent. Judge Judy's expression transformed from professional interest to barely contained fury. With all due respect, are you suggesting I don't understand basic construction law? Derek, emboldened by his own arrogance, doubled down. I'm just saying that television judges might not understand the complexities of actual contracting work. It was the fatal mistake, the moment of overconfidence Judge Judy had been waiting for. She opened the thick folder sitting on her bench, and her voice became surgical in its precision. Mr. Thompson, let me tell you what I understand. I understand that you are not licensed as a contractor in any state in this country. I understand, Judge Judy continued, her tone razor-sharp, that the photos you showed Mrs. Martinez of your previous work were stolen from Pinterest and other contractors' websites. I understand that the phone number sending her those text messages claiming she approved the work is registered to your business partner. And I understand that you have a very interesting pattern of targeting elderly widows with the exact same scam. Derek's face transformed from red to pale white in seconds. That's not accurate. Those are mistakes in your research. Judge Judy pulled out printed documents, each one a nail in Derek's coffin. These are building department records showing you have never pulled a permit under your name or your company name. This is a business license database showing your company doesn't exist. These are reverse image searches showing exactly where you stole those photos. Derek Thompson's entire body language changed in an instant. The aggressive posture collapsed, the booming voice cracked, and the sweating intensified until dark patches spread across his polyester suit, like a visual representation of his lies being exposed under harsh courtroom light. He tried to speak, his mouth opening and closing like a fish drowning in air, but no coherent words came out, just stammered fragments of excuses that died on his tongue before forming complete sentences. Your Honor, there must be. Those records are, I can explain. But Judge Judy wasn't finished. Not even close. She had built this case methodically, and now she was ready to detonate the bomb that would obliterate whatever remained of Derek's credibility. Linda Martinez sat straighter in her chair, watching the transformation of her tormentor with growing realization that maybe, just maybe, she hadn't been crazy after all. Maybe her memory was fine. Maybe Derek had been lying about everything from the very beginning. Judge Judy glanced at Linda with an expression that conveyed both sympathy and reassurance, then turned her attention back to Derek with the focused intensity of a prosecutor moving in for the kill. Mr. Thompson, I want to show you something that I think will be very interesting to everyone in this courtroom. Judge Judy pulled out another section of her folder, and the audience leaned forward collectively, sensing that something dramatic was about to happen. The camera zoomed in on Derek's face, capturing every bead of sweat, every nervous twitch, every flicker of panic that crossed his features. But what's really fascinating about your case, Mr. Thompson, Judge Judy continued, is that Mrs. Martinez isn't the first elderly widow you've targeted with this exact same scam. In fact, my research team has identified at least 13 other victims across 3 states, all of them elderly, all of them recently widowed, all of them left with damaged homes and empty bank accounts after you convinced them they were too old and confused to trust their own memories. Derek tried to stand, his hands gripping the defendant's table, his voice rising in desperation. This is ridiculous. You can't just make accusations without proof. This is a setup. Judge Judy's expression remained completely calm, but her eyes were ice cold. Sit down, Mr. Thompson, right now. The bailiff took a step closer, and Derek collapsed back into his chair, his breathing rapid and shallow. I'm not making accusations, Judge Judy continued, her voice cutting through the courtroom like a blade. I'm presenting facts, and I have someone who wants to speak with you today. Someone you know very well. The large monitor in the courtroom flickered to life, and a woman's face appeared on screen. She was in her mid-70s with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing reading glasses and sitting in what appeared to be a well-lit living room. The nameplate at the bottom of the screen read, Maria Chen, Phoenix, Arizona. Derek's reaction was immediate and visceral. His entire body jerked backward as if he'd been physically struck. His face went from pale to completely ashen, his mouth fell open, and his eyes widened with the kind of pure terror that comes from seeing your past crimes materialize in front of you, like ghosts demanding justice. Good afternoon, Your Honor. Maria's voice came through clear and strong. Nothing confused or fragile about it. Thank you for allowing me to participate in this hearing. I'm here because I want Mrs. Martinez to know that she is not crazy. She is not confused. And she is not alone. Everything Derek Thompson did to her. He did to me 8 months ago. The exact same pattern, the exact same lies, the exact same gaslighting phrases designed to make me question my own sanity. The courtroom erupted in gasps and murmurs. Audience members looked at each other in shock, and several pulled out their phones to record the unprecedented moment. Maria continued, her composure absolute and her testimony devastating. I hired Mr. Thompson in February of last year to renovate my bathroom. He found me through a Facebook advertisement that targeted Phoenix zip codes with high concentrations of senior citizens. He came to my home, told me about his grandmother, showed me fake photos of his work, and convinced me he was a licensed professional contractor. I paid him $5,000 up front out of my retirement savings. What I got was a destroyed bathroom, a damaged water main that flooded my house, and months of psychological torture where he tried to convince me that I had approved all the destructive work. Derek was now actively trying to leave his seat, but the bailiff's hand on his shoulder kept him in place. This is illegal. You can't ambush me with witnesses. I never worked for this woman. I don't even know who she is. Maria's expression on the monitor shifted between pity and contempt. Mr. Thompson, I have your signed contract right here. I have bank records showing $5,000 deposited into your account on February 18th. I have photographs of the damage you caused, and I have text messages where you used the exact same phrases you used with Mrs. Martinez. You told me, at your age, memory gets fuzzy. Those exact words, word for word what you told her. Judge Judy pulled out another stack of documents, her movements precise and deliberate. Mrs. Chen filed a police report in Phoenix. She contacted the Arizona Contractor Licensing Board. She tried to pursue charges, but you had already moved to California by then, hadn't you, Mr. Thompson? Always staying one step ahead of your victims, targeting elderly women who you thought would be too embarrassed or too confused to fight back effectively. Derek's voice came out as a strangled whisper. I want a lawyer. I'm not saying anything else without a lawyer. Judge Judy's response was swift and merciless. You should have thought about getting a lawyer before you came into my courtroom, thinking you could gaslight your way through this case. You should have thought about legal representation before you terrorized elderly widows and destroyed their homes. You should have thought about the consequences before you used your size and your voice to intimidate vulnerable women into questioning their own reality. But you didn't because you never thought you'd be held accountable. You thought you'd found the perfect victims, people society already dismissed as confused or unreliable, people whose children live far away, people who are isolated, grieving, and desperate for help. The transformation of Derek Thompson from aggressive bully to broken defendant was complete. Tears streamed down his face, mixing with sweat, his entire body shaking with sobs he tried desperately to suppress. Your Honor, please. I made mistakes. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I have financial problems. I was desperate. The excuses tumbled out in a pathetic stream of self-pity, but Judge Judy's expression showed zero sympathy. Financial problems? You stole over $100,000 from elderly victims across multiple states. You're not desperate. You're a predator, and predators don't deserve mercy. They deserve justice. Judge Judy's final ruling was delivered with the cold precision of a surgeon removing a cancer from society. Mr. Thompson, you will pay Mrs. Martinez $14,000 for the cost of repairing the damage you caused to her home. You will pay an additional $8,500 in emotional distress damages for the months of psychological torture you inflicted on her. You will pay $3,200 in court costs and legal fees. That's a total of $25,700. Furthermore, I am forwarding this entire case, including Mrs. Chen's testimony and all the evidence we've gathered, to the district attorney's office in both California and Arizona. Elder fraud is a felony in both states, and you've committed it at least 14 times that we know of. Get out of my courtroom before I hold you in contempt for wasting everyone's time with your lies. The gavel came down with a crack that echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot, sealing Derek's fate and ending what had become the most explosive elder fraud case ever televised. Derek tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't support him properly. He stumbled, grabbing the table for support, his fake Rolex sliding down his sweaty wrist. The bailiff had to physically assist him toward the exit as he sobbed openly, his massive frame shaking with the realization that his entire scheme had just been exposed to millions of viewers. The confident con artist who had walked in expecting an easy payday was now leaving, as a broken criminal facing serious prison time. The courtroom. Audience rose in a spontaneous, standing ovation not for entertainment, but for justice finally being served to a predator who had terrorized vulnerable elderly Americans for years. Linda Martinez collapsed into tears of relief. But these were different tears than the ones she'd cried for months. These were tears of vindication, of validation, of finally being believed after being gaslit into questioning her own sanity. Maria Chen's face on the monitor showed similar emotion, and Judge Judy did something unprecedented in her decades on television. She addressed both women directly, genuine warmth in her voice. "Mrs. Martinez, Mrs. Chen, you showed incredible courage coming forward. You refused to be silenced by a bully who counted on your shame and confusion to protect him. You are not confused. You are not too old. You are survivors who just saved countless other elderly people from becoming his next victims." The courtroom erupted in applause again, and even the hardened court staff had tears in their eyes. Within 2 hours of the episode airing, the internet exploded with a fury that Derek Thompson could never have imagined. The clip of his complete courtroom destruction went viral across every social media platform simultaneously, shared by millions of people who had been waiting their entire lives to see a gaslighter exposed so thoroughly. Twitter saw the hashtag #GaslighterExposed reach 1.8 million tweets in the first 3 hours, with users sharing their own stories of being manipulated and gaslit by con artists, abusive partners, and corrupt professionals. Facebook recorded over 45 million views within the first 24 hours, with thousands tagging elderly family members and warning them about contractor scams. TikTok creators made over 800 reaction videos, many breaking down the psychological manipulation techniques Derek had used and explaining how gaslighting works to younger audiences who might not recognize it. Reddit discussions erupted across 15 different subreddits, from legal advice forums analyzing the case to psychology communities breaking down Derek's manipulation tactics, to true crime enthusiasts tracking down his previous victims. YouTube compilations of the moment Maria Chen appeared on screen and Derek's face went white became the most watched courtroom moment in internet history, surpassing even the most famous Judge Judy cases from her entire career. Comment sections were flooded with variations of the same sentiment. Finally, a gaslighter gets what he deserves. This is what real justice looks like, and it protects our elderly loved ones from predators like this. The video accumulated over 85 million views in its first week, making it one of the most viral courtroom moments ever captured on television. The real-world consequences for Derek Thompson were swift, merciless, and absolutely deserved. Within 48 hours, detectives from 3 different states had contacted Judge Judy's production team, requesting copies of the full case file. The investigation revealed a pattern of elder fraud even more extensive than initially suspected. 14 additional elderly victims came forward after seeing the viral video, each with nearly identical stories of being targeted, manipulated, and financially destroyed. The total amount Derek had stolen over 3 years was calculated at $147,000, with victims ranging in age from 65 to 88, almost all widows or widowers targeted during their most vulnerable moments of grief. Derek was arrested at his apartment 6 days after the episode aired, charged with 14 counts of elder fraud, 9 counts of contractor fraud without a license, 6 counts of creating public safety hazards, and 3 counts of identity theft for using fake business credentials. His bail was set at $500,000, which he couldn't pay, so he remained in county jail awaiting trial while his entire life unraveled around him. His business partner, who had helped create the fake text messages and burner phone evidence, was arrested as an accomplice and agreed to testify against Derek in exchange for a reduced sentence. Derek's wife, who claimed she had no knowledge of his criminal activities, filed for divorce and moved back to her parents' home with their 2 children. His bank accounts were frozen by court order, his truck repossessed, and his apartment raided by investigators who found files on over 30 potential victims he had been researching for future scams. The trial became a media sensation, with local news covering every day of testimony. All 14 victims testified about Derek's identical manipulation tactics, his use of physical intimidation, and his systematic gaslighting designed to make them question their own memories and sanity. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. The judge, citing the predatory nature of his crimes and the vulnerability of his victims, sentenced Derek Thompson to 8 years in state prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. He was also ordered to pay $247,000 in restitution to his victims, an amount that would likely take him the rest of his life to repay. But the most important consequences emerged from the courage of Linda and Maria. The two women, who had never met before the trial, formed a deep friendship based on their shared trauma and determination to prevent other elderly people from becoming victims. They started a nonprofit called Silver Shield Advocacy, dedicated to educating seniors about contractor scams, financial fraud, and manipulation tactics. They spoke at senior centers, community colleges, and legislative hearings across multiple states, teaching warning signs of contractor fraud, questions to ask before hiring anyone, and most importantly, validating that if something feels wrong, it probably is, and elderly people should trust their instincts rather than being gaslit into silence. Their advocacy led to real legislative change. 3 states passed what became known as Linda's Law, requiring stricter background checks for contractors working with elderly clients, mandatory bonding requirements, and enhanced penalties for elder fraud. Several contractor licensing boards implemented new consumer protection policies, including verification systems where seniors could confirm a contractor's credentials with a simple phone call. Local police departments created elder fraud task forces trained specifically to recognize and investigate these predatory crimes. The cultural impact extended further, with the term gaslighting entering mainstream conversations as people learned to recognize and name the psychological manipulation they or their loved ones had experienced. Judge Judy herself donated $10,000 to Silver Shield Advocacy and featured Linda and Maria in a follow-up episode educating viewers on protecting elderly family members from scams. The episode became required viewing in several law enforcement training programs and elder care facilities. Linda used her portion of the restitution to finally complete her craft room, transforming Robert's workshop into a beautiful space where she now teaches free quilting classes to neighborhood children and seniors. Maria renovated her bathroom properly and turned part of her home into an office for Silver Shield Advocacy. Both women reported that helping others avoid their fate had transformed their trauma into purpose and their victimization into empowerment. If this story of justice delivered and predators exposed moved you, smash that like button to show your support for elderly victims who deserve protection and respect. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another moment when entitled bullies and criminal con artists face real consequences for their behavior. Comment below with your thoughts on what should happen to people who prey on vulnerable seniors. And share this video with someone who needs to see what happens when you try to gaslight Judge Judy and get caught in a web of your own lies. Remember, gaslighters count on silence and shame to protect them. Linda and Maria proved that courage and truth are more powerful than any manipulation tactic. In Judge Judy's courtroom and in life, justice always finds a way. Respect is not optional, and predators eventually meet someone who sees right through their act. Thank you for watching, and never forget that our elderly citizens deserve dignity, protection, and the absolute certainty that when they speak up about abuse, someone will believe them and hold their abusers accountable.